You're listening to After Hours by RedCompass Labs, the podcast where the best and brightest of the financial services industry let their hair down, unbutton their collars, and share what they really think about payments. Let's kick things off.
I'm joined today by Jessica Ramos, who is the Head of Regulatory and Financial Affairs at the Euro Banking Association Clearing. So great to have you on here. Obviously, there's a lot that's happening in payments.
I know, yeah. It's a busy time.
Busy time, and actually recording this the day after the instant payments regulation. So exciting times here in Brussels. But obviously, one of the big trends has been around fraud and fraud prevention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, can you tell us a little bit about kind of the trends that you're seeing in fraud and how's that evolving?
Yeah, so EBA Clearing is providing payment systems in the retail space and also in wholesale. And we cover a lot of SEPA. So basically we have full reach in our systems in SEPA. And we process about 20 billion transactions per average on a yearly basis. And so we see a lot of that data. There's also the European Banking Authority, who issued the Consumer Trends Report recently, and they were very specific about unauthorized payment transactions being the biggest issue that the national competent authorities are raising. And so you see these types of unauthorized payment transactions. It's basically when consumers are targeted by fraudsters and they give their data either by phishing, like text or emails, or they get calls and they're forced to give their banking data and fall victim to fraud. And so we do see that, for example, when analyzing our retail payments data, we can see that there's a higher recall for fraud reason in instant payments, for example, than in SET, but it's a growing problem in terms of the industry. We see that obviously with COVID and all of the different technologies emerging, we have more digital payments, and as such, then the fraud problem is also growing.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that you mention that, right? So faster payments means faster fraud.
That's the belief, yeah, and I think there's a lot of, because the European Commission has this push to with the instant payments regulation and they want it to be the new normal, then there is the belief that faster payments will mean faster fraud or instant fraud. And the reason that is because, there's less chance for recovery of the losses. If the funds are there instantly, then the fraudsters can get away with it instantly as well.
Absolutely, and it's also a trend that we've seen in the UK with faster payments. If we look at the statistics of authorized push payment fraud there, we see that as faster payments have grown in the UK as have authorized push payments. So it's a trend that's repeating itself.
Absolutely.
In other markets where we see real-time payments emerging, like in the US, certainly something to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the regulators were very spot on in including this in the regulation and the recent proposal, the big package, because they're also through providing a little bit of certainty, legal certainty, especially in the payment services regulation, the review of the PSD2, we see that it becomes very clear that the European Commission sees this as a very fundamental thing that the industry has to do to collaborate and tackle fraud in a comprehensive manner.
Absolutely, because it's a big financial loss to consumers.
Absolutely.
It's not just the financial aspect, and I think in the UK, again, it's one of the regions where this is coming up a lot more in discussions. It's also got a big emotional and a human aspect.
It's a social aspect,
well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because it's not only the consumers now. Like we see a liability shift in many jurisdictions where the regulator is saying, well, it's not only the consumers that have to bear the loss, but it's actually moving towards PSPs. And PSPs are now having to, for example, in France, you have to refund your customer within 24 hours when they report they put a claim for fraud. And if you don't, then it starts to generate interest. It's an example of how the liability is shifting from the consumers to PSPs. So obviously this is a big financial impact.
And that system is essentially getting expanded to Europe with PSR. So we have this liability shift away from the payer towards their payment service providers. It's interesting that there's this big focus on payment service providers to essentially combat fraud, whereas a lot of the fraud is generated on social media, on telco,
Absolutely.
and it seems like there's a little bit less pressure. But one of the things that I'm wondering, and I'd like to get your views about it, does it create a moral hazard? Does it take away the brakes for consumers to be suspicious, to not be too wary of these frauds? Or
I think, if you see the objectives of the European Commission's proposal, one of them is obviously to strengthen customer SEA rules, to offer tools, actually the IBAN name check to all credit transfers to their consumers, but they also include security awareness. And I think it's important that we look at it in a holistic manner, because it's not, we can have all the tools, but the problem with fraud is that the modus, the threat vectors, it's like cybersecurity, right? They change all the time. And we need to keep that dynamic, and we need to be able to continue to educate the consumers. We need to evolve the technology, of course, but it's layering tools with it's having all the capabilities, the tools, the technology, the people, and obviously the processes and the rules in this case, right?
Yeah, it seems like a cat and mouse game, right?
Yeah, absolutely, exactly.
As our technology gets more sophisticated to try to detect fraud, the fraudsters get more sophisticated as well. We've even seen cases of deep fake artificial intelligence being used to generate fraud. So yeah, they're getting quite advanced. So to get back to this regulation, so we talked about instant payments, about the payment services regulation, so the replacement of PSD2. So they're a liability shift. But now with the instant payments regulation, there's also some new things related to fraud. Can you share
absolutely.
A little bit about that?
So it's one of the mandatory components of the instant payments regulation is that PSPs will need to offer a IBAN name alignment tool. And so in the industry, we call that confirmation of payee. So actually EBA Clearing and the Euro Banking Association are the entity. We've been working on fraud for a number of years now, and I think a lot of this came from the users of our systems and from our community, because they saw the growing trend. They see this not an obstacle, but as a growing problem to move to instant payments. And so, for example, the Euro Banking Association created a fraud taxonomy. And it sounds pretty simple, but actually when we're now able with the PSR to share fraud-related information between PSPs, the fact that we can literally use the same vocabulary, categorize the threats in a standard approach, that harmonization, that standardization is going to make communicating about fraud way more efficient and more cost effective. So that was really welcomed by the community.
Yeah.
And then on the clearing side, so on the payment system side, we have been working a number of years now with the users on designing a functionality that will go on top of our instant payment system, RT1, and on top of our Step 2, which is our SEPA retail payment system for credit transfers and direct debits. And so we'll be able to offer this functionality whereby PSPs will leverage the central view that we have from a network perspective, so the data of all those transactions, to be able to detect patterns and then spot anomalies. So it's called FPAD, Fraud, Pattern, and Anomaly Detection. And we're very enthusiastic. The community is super enthusiastic about it, because it actually works in complementary to their own tools, because obviously banks, PSPs, they have a lot of information about their own customers.
Yeah.
But now they will be able to complement that with information that you can gather from the network. So it's going to become a lot more effective, and they're going to be able to combat a lot of fraud that way.
Absolutely. And I understand that the core principle is, data sharing using this common data that EBA Clearing has to try to detect patterns of fraud.
Yeah. Historic data. Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. It's been a challenge for a lot of banks when it comes to combating fraud because they're open to sharing data, but on the other side here in Europe we have GDPR, we have data privacy. So how do we strike that balance in, on one side, combating fraud effectively, but on the other side not going too far when it comes to data privacy?
So that was one of the things that the PSR, the Payment Service Regulation, addresses, and I can tell you, like, PSPs were super happy they received this very positively, because the fact that it's a regulation and not a directive, which gets implemented in each member state, means that they have the legal certainty that they need to share fraud-related data amongst each other, notwithstanding the GDPR requirements, the privacy requirements, and it makes it very clear that it's possible to share data amongst themselves, fraud data, without being in non-compliance with GDPR and also Bank Secrecy Acts or Bank Secrecy principles. So the Commission has really given that legal comfort to PSPs, so that makes it possible for pan-European initiatives, so across all the different jurisdictions, to be able to function, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that we've seen in our work around fraud prevention as well, is that there are challenges in Europe because different data privacy authorities interpret the regulation or
they give a different flavor
differently. The laws are slightly different in each country, so having that legal pan-European legal basis is certainly going to help.
Absolutely. I think that was really welcome, and we know that the fraudsters are sharing data amongst themselves, so we should be allowed to be in the good guys should be allowed to be in the same level playing field. Perfect.
And with so FPAD, great project that EBA Clearing is working on. Is that already live today? Is that going live soon? What's the timeline?
Yeah, so we've been working. We're actually currently running a pilot with 9 banks from 6 different countries, small banks and big banks. So it's a really nice group of people who are fraud experts and are really helping to shape the rules, because it's rule-based, and really shaping the model. And we've been running that for a couple of months now, and we've actually already have some views of where you can see cases where using historic data at a network level proves to be very effective. So it's proving the value. And we're going to be able to make that functionality available to everybody as from March of 2024. So
excited to see the results.
Yeah.
So besides your role at EBA Clearing, you're also very active in EWPN. Can you tell us a little bit more? What is EWPN and what do you guys do?
So I'm very active in everything that has to do with women empowerment and actually diversity and inclusion. It's been a part of my mission, let's say, my personal mission, since I can remember. And so I took on a role as the Belgian ambassador of EWPN, so European Women Payments Network, in 2019, end of 2019. And obviously that was before the pandemic, just before the pandemic. And then into 2021, I moved up to the board. And basically what we do is it's volunteers. So everybody who's part of the organization has full-time jobs. And what we do is we really try to bring together a community of people in the payments and fintech industry that believe in diversity and inclusion and that want to promote and create opportunities for people to people to be part of the payments world community and really shine a light to those role models that we have as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's great that you guys are doing that work, and it's much needed. If businesses or individuals want to get involved and support this diversity agenda, what can we do? What can we do to empower women in the workplace?
Yeah,
what can we do to improve diversity?
I think, like the reason why because I had created MizBiz, which is a broader, it wasn't industry specific, network for women, for connecting and empowering women. And then I decided to shift my focus into very narrow payments. And the reason is because in the payments and fintech industry, we still see a very little amount of women. And it's not only women, by the way, it's all types of diversity. And at EWPN, we promote all sorts of diversity. Disability, gender, race, LGBTQIA, all the type of diversity. And I think, I'm not even going to try to make the case for diversity and inclusion and why that's important, because I think at this stage, everyone understands why. There's a financial and economic incentive to do that. You're just also like going to have better organizations, happier organizations. And so I'm not going to go too much into that. But I think what we can do is a lot as leaders in our own organizations. We can create opportunities for people that are coming, behind us and try to pass on those values of inclusivity, of giving people a voice, of listening to people that are different than us, hiring people that are different than us. And really creating a space where people can be heard, and sometimes they're going to surprise you with the amazing ideas that they have that you wouldn't have thought of in a million years.
The hiring can be a challenging part, though, because simply if we look at the CVs that we get in, certainly in the tech industry, it's not as balanced as we would like to see it, and as diverse. So.
I think that's a very important point. Payments and fintech is seen as very technical, and typically women are not prone to apply to very technical roles, even though I have seen amazing women in technical roles. For example, at EBA Clearing, our head of operations is a woman. And I think why I do all of this, because it is a lot of effort and it is, on top of your day-to-day, is because I know I'm like head of finance and head of regulatory, so that's typically more female, like there is more female, but I want to create the visibility that it's possible. Like I am from Honduras, I'm from it's a third world country. I was young when I entered the industry. I'm a woman. And through sharing all of my stories, but being able to show, hey, it is possible to succeed in the industry and have a great career that is both fun and entertainment and fulfilling. And I'm in a company where I can live those values. Just by creating the visibility, I think that has an impact. And people think, okay, well, if she works there, then I might be able to have the same type of career. So it's through creating the network and giving visibility to role models, that already has an impact. So you have more women wanting to apply.
Fantastic. And where can people find out more about EWPN?
Well, we have a website, European Women Payments Network, EWPN.eu, and social media, LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn, and we have an annual event every year. We just had it in October in Vienna, and it was just amazing. We're going to be publishing soon our wrap-up video, which is very cool, and it gives the overview of that sense of community and coziness and real human connections and authenticity, which is what we're all about.
Fantastic. It was great having you on, Jess. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to After Hours by RedCompass Labs. If you've enjoyed this discussion and are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please do follow us to be informed about new podcasts coming up. That's all for this episode. See you next time.